So, banking oligopoly or oligarchy is a concept introduced by Simon Johnson of MIT, and I hope you're all following his blog, The Baseline Scenario, which is one of the most illuminating commentaries on the financial crisis. So where do they fit into the picture? What went wrong? Were the banks adding wealth? Was what they were doing valuable to the economies? And is Simon's bank oligarchy theory correct? Well, first thing, what went wrong is it wasn't credit. It wasn't owing too much. It was liquidity. It's really important to understand, and we went through that in the panel, so I'm going to go through that really fast. Liquidity trumps accounting solvency. That's all you need to know. If you're not liquid, then you're going to go down when there's a crunch. Did the banks add wealth to their nations? No, they just enriched other bankers, as it turns out. Here's what happened. We got 10 years of ever-increasing, very large profits in the banking industry, leading to 10 years' worth of ever-increasing and very large bonuses. Fantastic. However, the losses in the last year exceeded all of those profits. You add up all the profits that were made, out of which those bonuses were paid, and those losses exceeded them all. So that actually there wasn't any profit, and there actually shouldn't have been any bonuses. It's very important to understand this. Say I have a bet with you where we'll toss a coin, or roll a dice, let's say. And if it comes up with anything but one, you'll pay me a good bonus. And we roll it, and we roll it, and we roll it, and I keep making that nice bonus. If, on the other hand, I roll a 1, I won't get a bonus. In fact, you'll get all the money you've ever paid me. Will I pay that to you? No, I can't. Sorry, I developed a new kitchen for my wife last year, and I spent all that bonus. Okay, who pays it? Well, the government will pay you if we roll a 1. We roll a 1, the government pays you. We roll anything else, you pay me. Is that all right? So the losses were recovered by saving the banks and replenishing the equity. And we've replenished the equity through government injections, which impoverish taxpayers. That's you and me, by the way. And new equity, which impoverished existing shareholders, which unfortunately was also you and me if we, had pension schemes or whatever. All right, so the bonuses were not repaid in that circumstance. So let's look at Simon Johnson's belief that the banks are an oligarchy, like any other oligarchy that takes over a country and uses that country's economic system for its own benefit. He, by the way, used to be the chief economist for the IMF, so he's entitled to have a view, and his view is very compelling. Banks suddenly, in the mid-90s, started lending, whether in the euro area or the US, at a far higher rate than they had done so before. Not, of course, in Japan. And my belief, I was a consultant to banks for about 15 years. My belief is that in the 80s, bankers were honorable, decent people doing good things. And I really liked all my clients, and I thought they were great. The beginning of the 1990s saw a change in the behaviors, attitudes, and business dealings of the major banks of the West. The share of the financial sector in GDP went up everywhere. Now, at the beginning of the last century, from 1910 to about 1930, bankers were paid about 60% more on average than you or me. Apparently, at the time, bankers were worth being paid 60% higher than the average person in other industries. You can believe that's true, you can believe that's not true. Incidentally, I heartily recommend a book to you, Once in Golconda, which is a book about these times. And there are so many parallels with what happened in the last decade, except that in those days, the bankers knew they were having ramps and creating bubbles. They were doing it deliberately, and they were allowed to by law. I believe that they didn't really realize they were doing it in the last decade. But anyway, there they were, earning a lot of money, making ramps, stealing from the public, pushing shares up in bubbles, and then quickly getting out at the top and leaving the shares to collapse. It's all in that book, Once in Golconda. Wonderful book. And so regulation came in the 30s. And all of these laws were passed where those red bars are. This is all, you can see the reference down at the bottom. And bankers' pay collapsed until by around 1990, bankers were being paid about the same as you or me. Just by regulating banks and preventing some of those bad things from happening, bankers' pay had dropped back to about, in my opinion, where it should have been. Because I don't think banking is actually, in general, more or less difficult than that in any other industry. Oh dear. We removed all of that regulation and legislation, and now bankers are earning about 70% more than you or me. And they still are, because banker pay hasn't changed. But it all happened very recently, from about 1990 onwards. Now, there have been some new laws in place. Will they have any effect? Will those laws go any further? I'm indebted to Simon Johnson for most of this analysis, by the way, but I think it's very powerful. The profits in the US financial sector rose as a result of all of this to be around 30-35% of the entire economy. Now think very hard, put your quantitative MIT hat on, think about sort of banking and think of the economy. Should it be that 35% of the profits of the economy are made from banking? I don't see anybody nodding, but I don't think there are many bankers in the room. So in theory, there's some banking activities that create value. Intermediation, risk management, advisory. These things are useful in a society. And I would argue, the way it feels to me, gut feel, that's about, 10% of the economy, somewhere between 5 to 50% of the economy. We need all of that. Banking is very important. We were just told it's really important for making the economy go. Seems to me that's about 5 to 15% of the economy. The rest of financial services activities are what's known as a zero-sum game. Trading, oligopoly profit, speculation, all of these things, you can make money out of them, but that means somebody else loses money. And I'm now going to introduce you to a really important technical term that's used extensively in banking, but for some reason the bankers don't mention the use of this term to their customers. It's the terms stuffer, stuffing, stuffy. Think perhaps of a Strasbourg goose being stuffed with corn to create the wonderful foie gras that is needed. Okay, to make money in those areas, you have to be a stuffer selling to stuffies. With the ultimate stuffy, if there's nobody else to pay, being the government, which, by the way, means us, because there's only us funding the government. Okay, so the full story of how stuffers stuff the stuffies hasn't really been told